Welcome to Old Man Blerd. Hi, I'm John, and along with my friend Terrance, we make up a pair of lifelong geeks who happen to be black, over 50, but are certainly nerds first and foremost. The Alpha Geek and the Omega Freak. And we welcome everyone. And by everyone, we mean nerds, blerds, and bleaks, cosplayers and role players, geeks and freaks, Marvel zombies and distinguished competitors, Trekkies, Star Warriors, Batmaniacs, and Spider fans, Warhams, Whovians, AFOLs, adult fans of Legos, Tolkienites, Weeaboos, Supernatural Hunters and Otakus, Ava Geeks, Bro Stars and Sistars, Pokemon Trainers, Potterheads, Bronies, Whovians, Browncoats and Scoobies, and all nerd properties in between. Because we are over 50, we've seen a thing or two and have experience, long experience, with a lot of these properties. So thank you for listening to Old Man Blerd.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Old Man Blerd, bi-monthly podcast-ish, bi-monthly-ish podcast, in which two older black nerds reminisce, remonstrate, complain, cajole, all sorts of different subjects in the world of nerd properties. That's comic books, that's collectibles, that's movies, that's kaiju, that's Dungeons and Dragons, that's Warhammer, that's all the things that a person could claim as nerdy if they identify as a nerd or a blerd, a black nerd. So I'm waiting on Terrance to pop in. I believe he's going to pop in soon. I will give you a little bit of a taste of what I've been doing nerd-wise while we wait. So I did get a chance to see the Fallout show. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. Binged the whole thing, the wife and I binged the whole thing. And I thought it was fairly true to the spirit of Fallout. I then started replaying Fallout 3. I'm still playing Fallout 4 in addition to that. I played Fallout New Vegas a while ago and 76. I don't know if I completed 76. I feel like I may have. Anyway, so I'm familiar with the property, and I thought it was great. You didn't hear any of the grumblings from the woke or the anti-woke. A pox on both of your houses, in my personal opinion. Forgive my dog back there. He's got a bit of barkitis. Anyways, a pox on both the houses of the woke and the anti-woke, because I thought it was fine. I thought it was perfectly fine and, just an enjoyable set of shows. And I quite appreciated actually how the title, sort of the title shot changed each episode, similar to the way that Supernatural changed every season, had a different sort of title opening and commercial break opening. I thought that was great. And I look forward to another season. I did see a meme that was like the three main characters were representative of how people play Fallout. I'm not sure which one I fall into because I do a little bit of everything. I don't like the setting up camps piece that much. I like to kind of roam around and get into hijinks. That's the way that I play Fallout. But a perfectly suitable addition to the Fallout universe. And I think that it seems as though the Fallout fans are really mostly supportive of it. I haven't seen a whole lot of complaining with the show. So check it out. I thought it was worthwhile. That's one nerd thing that I did. I also spent an inordinate amount of time trying to find a Funko Pop Gear 5 Luffy, uh, to no avail. I had to just go directly to Funko itself to get it, which is fine. It's just paying for shipping, which is more than what you'd pay in tax if you had it at a store. I did look around for a new One Piece card set that just came out, the Three Brothers. Haven't seen hide nor hair of it anywhere. And I really don't know that I want to go to a card shop because they're going to charge an arm and a leg and a few toes. And I am not into that. I think that's going to end up killing that game. The fact that it's just so hard to find product. So, you know, there you go. I'll get off my soapbox. Let's see, what other sort of nerdy thing did I do? I think that's about it. Oh, I finally renewed my subscription to Marvel Unlimited. I had a subscription for since the beginning, and I let it lapse, I guess the middle of last year. I wasn't super enthused with anything that was coming out, but I'm interested in sort of the fall of the House of X that's coming out and uh, Marvel Spider-Man Unlimited. I'm curious about that. I picked up the first issue and haven't read it yet, but I'm kind of like, I might give it a chance. I don't need my Peter Parker to be with Mary Jane. I arguably prefer it. I think that comic books are, I think, a bit better when they allow some significant changes to stay in place. And I think that it would have been fine having him be married because I think that it would eventually get to him having a kid, and then you could have the whole thing start all over again with his daughter, which is, I believe, is typically what he ends up having. So I thought that would be fun. And so I'm just kind of curious as to how that's going to play. I feel like they've been fumbling the ball so consistently with Spider-Man. I just don't know how they're going to recover it and do well by it unless they just do like some kind of crazy reboot. I also was interested in checking out the Fantastic Four because I don't know what's going on with them. And I think that was mostly it. And then just reading back issues, some of which I have but don't want to dig out. And some I just, I've had and let go of but would like to reread. So another subscription to Marvel Unlimited. And, I'm feeling pretty good about it, frankly. So I'm not sure. Usually if Terrance doesn't give me a jingle in the day, something's going on for him and we're not able to record. So let's keep our fingers crossed and hope our nerd brother from another mother is okay. I'm sure he is. He's just probably trying to get back home in time to do the recording, which is fine. If it doesn't happen this week, we'll just have this abbreviated chat, just you and me. I don't know if I can hold court for an hour, but who knows? What we were going to discuss if he gets a chance to get pop on is we were going to discuss how our love for things nerdy changes over time. and how sometimes it evolves and how sometimes it sort of withers away, and that's okay. I had sort of tentatively thought that I would call this nerdopause, like menopause, uh, embrace the change. No offense against anyone who's experiencing menopause. We have people we love dearly that are currently going through that transformation. And I think it would just be, it needs to be understood a little bit, that as you age, the things that you like or the reasons why you like them change. Spider-Man's a perfect example. When I was younger, I mean, I started with Spider-Man when I was 11, probably in 1981. And I just liked him fighting the bad guys. I wasn't that engaged with his relationships with Betty Bryant or with Gwen Stacy or Mary Jane Watson. I just wasn't that engaged. Actually, I sort of preferred him being solo, having a lot of bad luck, and not really having things go his way because, I was a preteen and early teenager, and that's kind of what my experience was with life in general, was kind of that way. Now, I would love to see a Spider-Man that's married and that married with children and having to deal with that and what kinds of responsibilities he has when it changes not only that his responsibility to his sort of job as a superhero, but what are his responsibilities to his family? And, I think that there have been plenty of superhero properties that have played with that energy and tried to negotiate with that and what that looks like. What does it look like to have a married with children superhero? Are there times when he just is like, I'm just not gonna chase that bad guy down. I'm going to stay at home, Netflix and chill. And I think that that is an interesting thing to look at. And for older fans, because I think that the nerd demographic is a bit older now because, people that were collecting in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, or older. And so that sort of wish fulfillment with superheroes, it just doesn't work completely. But, you know, in many respects, I more respect and more enjoy some of the relationship stuff that does happen with Spider-Man or does happen with Fantastic Four, it does happen with other superheroes because now I understand it. When I was single or preteen or teenager, didn't get it. And when I got to my 20s, early 20s anyway, that's when Vertigo was starting to happen at DC. And those stories really captivated me because they were more mature. And so, things do change and evolve as you grow older. So embrace the change, embrace nerdopause. It's fine. It's fine to not be so into a particular property. It's fine to grow out of it, or not feel as passionately about it. I think that over the course of the weeks that you all have been listening to our podcast, you've probably seen that, some of the things that, these sort of nerd arguments, nerd rage, a lot of them really are sort of, for lack of a better way of looking at it or a better sort of analogy, they really are kind of young person nerd rage issues. Uh, like take Stella Blade, Stellar Blade, I believe it, that, hasn't even the game hasn't even come out yet. And people are just all up in arms about, oh, she's attractive, or, is this what a real woman looks like? Or, why can't Western computer game designers design attractive female characters? And I don't know, as a middle-aged man going through Nerdopause, don't really I don't really get the problem. I don't really get the issue because to me, I don't need the avatar that I'm playing as to be someone that I like to see jiggle physics on. That's just, that's just not where I'm at now. If I was 16, maybe 16, where good wind blows and you're you're aroused. Yeah, maybe. 53, no, don't don't really care. And so some of these really strident arguments that are occurring in nerd space really do strike me as things that are predominantly, you know, of a certain age. And I just don't completely know if a person older would even care. It's like, what kind of time do you have? It's a bit like Pokemon. I think if you are young in the backseat of your parents' car playing Pokemon, no problem having to grind out a bunch of different things to get the perfect IVs and EVs. Yeah, you've got nothing but time. You are working a regular job uh with hours and you have responsibilities, maybe you have kids of your own. A little different. It really is a little different. And then it's like, oh, things like mints and bottle caps and all of these things that were part of Sword and Shield, Pokemon Sword and Shield, uh are really quality of life things that help because you just don't have the time to spend hours and hours just building up one Pokemon to not necessarily even to compete, but just to have the Pokemon that you want to fight the battles that you want. So, embrace the change, embrace the transformation, and allow yourself to become old with a property. And that means that you sometimes have to let go of these changes that they have with characters that are not the way you understood the character to be. When I was first reading Daredevil, and I started reading Daredevil, the Miller run, and so it was very particular. There was a lot of ninjas. There was a lot of Elektra and Kingpin and the Gladiator and all these different things. And it was fine. And it got a little deeper with, his relationship to his partner, Foggy, and everything else. Much later, turned out everybody then knew who Daredevil was, and that changed, and that, became a status quo. Now, that's not the Daredevil that I was used to. I mean, there was that period of Born Again where the Kingpin knew his identity and tried to destroy his life. And those that was great. And I think that if you are empowered by nerd aging, you don't need to have the character stay the way you understood the character to be when you liked the character. And so, you can allow for those changes. And I don't think that younger-ish nerds really understand that. Like they understand what they liked in their early teens and that, and then they get to 20 or early 30s, and they're like, this isn't the character that I loved. But by the time, if that character has any age, by the time that character is changed from their teen years to their late 20s or 30s, they've probably already gone through 5 or 6 different changes anyway, you know? So people need to embrace that change. I believe the recording paused there briefly, but yeah, embrace the change. So I think that some of sort of the hostility that people have, sometimes it is older folks. What's going on with Warhammer currently and making some characters. Oh, excuse me. Work today, so I'm a little tired. Uh, what is going on with Warhammer currently is that they sort of changed that certain characters, I believe the Custodes are now women. They're female Custodes. And that changes the lore quite a bit. It changes the historical lore, I should say. But, if you're experiencing and embracing the change, it's not a big deal. You don't have to play that faction. I think, and the people that are really hostile about that, um, I feel like in some ways they've turned Warhammer into like a real significant part of their life. And I do think pop culture has a place in your life, and it can have even a very important place. I mean, this podcast wouldn't exist if it wasn't for a certain level of importance of these pop culture things being in our lives. But I think there's a point where it gets to be outsized. Like nothing tells me how much we're in a mouse utopia. For those of you that do not know what mouse utopia is, look it up. Was an experiment that sort of mirrors in many ways what our current Western civilization is going through in terms of just self-absorption and embracing tremendous vanity at the expense of our sanity. Anyways, there's nothing that shows me more that we're kind of headed towards a mouse utopia than the fact that people get in hugely charged, almost violent uh, reactions about pop culture. I mean, they get into knockdown dragouts like, you can't do this, you can't have this character be black, you can't have this character be a woman, you can't add women to this situation. Why do we need to have gay characters? Why are there trans characters in this property that I've liked? On and on and on and on. And when these things were arguably more in the closet or the basement, the nerd basement, prior to Hollywood and everything else discovering the keys to that basement, to the secret vault. There were always, characters that were gay. There was always characters that were trans. There was always characters that were non-binary. There was always characters that were black. I mean, one of the X-Men's most popular characters is Storm, for goodness sakes. So, and this is, uh, gosh, I mean, when did Giant Size X-Men 1 appear? Like 78, 79? I can't even remember at this point. 77? 76? Somewhere in there. And so these are characters that have been around for a while. And so some of this nerd rage needs to be tempered with really accepting and embracing the evolution of your tastes and sensibilities, to know that, there's more to life than these properties. I mean, people who write these comics, who write these sci-fi shows, who write Doctor who are doing Star Trek, it isn't all of their lives. So why are you making it all of your life? It's almost as if the West, after it lost any notion of a wisdom tradition that made sense, or let go of any kind of philosophy, let go of any kind of, real questioning of where are we going? What are we doing with our lives? What is the politics that serves us? What is the environment that serves us? What is a wisdom tradition or a philosophy that serves us? Once the West let go of that, it's just all been sort of this materialistic nihilism of, pop culture and arguing about pop culture. People argue about pop culture now the way they used to argue about workers' rights. And to me, lifelong nerd will ride or die with Marvel and Doctor Who and Star Trek and Star Wars and Lego and all of the things, forever. No, you don't have to have an opinion on everything. You don't have to have any kind of notion of, these things all the time. It's like I love the statement that says, go touch grass. Go touch grass. It's okay. Go touch grass. You don't have to be locked into your phone or your computer games or your iPad or your Android and just debating the minutia of Warhammer lore. You don't have to, get mad because someone wants to put more women in a Star Wars property. You can just not watch it. But now that these things are arguably replacing the zealotry of religion, the zealotry of political discourse, although we have plenty of that too, then people are reacting with these pop culture phenomena the way people used to react if they were Protestant in Northern Ireland or Catholic in Northern Ireland. It's like you can have this not be this contentious, I would argue. And perhaps if maybe we spent less time arguing about, woke casting or anti-woke casting or, the fact that casting a certain person means that so much somehow of that what agenda you're pursuing. Maybe if we thought about that less, maybe we could, I don't know, get people fed, get people housed, get people to, get along because the enemy is not, someone who has a different take than you. The enemy is the monetization of that, the weaponization of that. You don't have to have everything be so contentious. You can embrace the change. And so, at this point, some of the properties I have loved have gone through, I don't know how many different sort of versions. It's Spider-Man 2.0 or 3.0. At this point, Spider-Man's gone through more revisions and reboots than I can think of. And some of them I've liked, some of them I don't like. I don't have to read them. I don't have to scream into the cyber void about how that is not my Spider-Man. It's like, okay, all right, touch grass. Embrace the change. Embrace nerdopause. Just embrace aging with these properties. I mean, I feel like, and maybe I'm not as plugged into the Doctor Who stuff, at least in terms of the opinions online, but I feel like Doctor Who does a pretty good job navigating that. Like they just changed the Doctor. Yeah, he had a regeneration. Now it's this person. And you might like them, you might not. I mean, I love Tennant, but I love Capaldi. I love Matt Smith. I love Tom Baker. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I think at a certain point, you just have to enjoy the ride of these things. We are a storytelling species, and you can just enjoy the ride of these things. And if it's not your cup of tea, that's fine. You know, I don't think we need to have as profound a view on everything. But I've said that. I'm beating that I'm beating that horse into the ground. So I'm trying to think of other properties that I have just changed with. I think music, and at some point I'm going to start a bonus episodes of Old Man Blerd where we talk about music nerddom because I really do think uh, I'm pretty bona fide when it comes to music snobbery. I was lucky to have parents that liked, R&B and disco and some jazz and some oldies. And I had friends in the suburbs where we were into punk and we were into new wave and we were into goth. And I had friends that were into heavy metal. And so I just got into all of that stuff from, the 80s on. And so, I have hundreds of just metal records. I have hundreds of new wave, alternative quote unquote records. I got to see many bands when they were nothing, and so, I think that that is something with music nerddom that, there's always this shifting of change and transformation and people borrowing and being influenced by one another. And I really need to have an episode where I just talk about Beyonce's Cowboy Carter, which I think is a phenomenal record. I've never been particularly a Beyonce fan. I liked Lemonade, and that was the first record I ever was like, I'm going to give this a chance. And I mean, this is, as a person who has, probably 100 or more death metal records alone, not to mention other things. So, you know, and I have country stuff. So I have, I don't know, probably a dozen Willie Nelson records. I have half a dozen or more Johnny Cash records. I do my country music listening is one of the smaller things that I have in terms of my collection, but I do have it, and I thought it was a sound record. I think that it is not entirely a country record, but you know, and I just think that we don't have to get into arguments about every bit of pop culture. We can really just be like, oh, that's not for me, and just let it go. But we've become so focused on identity wars and culture wars. And in my opinion, and this is probably when I get to the Politrix podcast, which will be starting here in a week or two, I think that one of the things that I would say is that they're getting you to play these culture war games, particularly with pop culture, because they don't want you to get involved in the class war. Hold on one moment. I'm going to take care of this stuff. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, if you ever hear my dog barking, that's Milton. I think it's like his full name is Milton Bhagavan Cocoa Puffs Hershey uh furry weirdo Holmes. So that there he has multiple names. Um anyways, uh I've got him under control, but like I was saying, you know, I think that they have us fighting these pop culture wars about comics, about sci-fi, about fantasy. A lot of people had a problem with the new excuse me, the new Lord of the Rings show that they had, Rings of Power, I think it was. I'm not sure what the title was. I didn't watch it, not out of any reaction about the color of the elves, but just time. I mean, there's so much content at this point. You could really just be watching things nonstop. You really can. You really can. I mean, everything is just so available, and some of it is so good. I mean, you used to have to wait for something like RoboCop to come out, or Star Wars to come out, or another Star Trek series that was going to be good, or you really did have to wait. You couldn't get manga as easy. You didn't have necessarily Lego stores. Speaking of which, we will be speaking to a gentleman that I'm a big fan of, who is quite the Lego connoisseur. Black 312, I believe. I know him as Etienne, but he is going to be with us on the pod next week. So, that's going to be a great time talking about Lego. Sorry, it's Black Machine 312. A gentleman by the name of Etienne, who lives in Montreal. We'll be talking to him about Lego past, present, and future, and some of the things that he's involved with. And he's also, you know, deep in manga world and comic book world. So we're going to be able to really talk to him about a lot of stuff. But that'll be next week. But anyways, all of these things were really hard to get at one point in time. And now you can get manga at Barnes and Noble. And because you can get manga at Barnes and Noble, because you can get Lego at the mall, at the Lego store, because you can get Gundam at Target, you can get Gunpla at Target. You Funko Pops are virtually everywhere. Like I said, I was trying real hard to get Gear 5 Luffy. Because they're so ubiquitous now, I think everybody really senses a certain level of ownership about it. And there was a bit of elitism being a sci-fi fan, being a D&D person, being a comic book person, and you just didn't like the noobs that would come in, being into certain game properties from day one, you'd get really hostile about people and, kind of encroaching in your territory. But it isn't your territory. This is just the territory. And I think we as human beings, we are such natural storytellers, that we both consume stories and we write stories, and in many ways we construct stories about our lives, many of which are not true, but that's a Buddhist thing that I'd have to get into on the Buddhist podcast that we do. But, some of these stories, we're really into stories. And I think that there's a sense of ownership of those stories, that's my story, that's somehow expressing my identity, and therefore it's important, and you liking it challenges my identity. And that is a really sad state of affairs, because I do remember going to Comic Cons early and going to these, fantasy cons, or, D&D groups or whatever else. Everyone was just super stoked that you were there. They were like, oh, another person that we can talk about and trade opinions with. And that's how the space of nerddom used to be. It wasn't like, yeah, you might say, oh, I don't like the what Byrne is doing to Superman. I mean, yeah, people had their opinions. Uh, but it felt less charged, because you knew that as soon as you walked out of that comic book store, any number of people were going to be like, ugh, nerds. And they used it as a slur, not as a badge of honor. So, I think that has led to people really attaching identity to these things. So I hear you out in cyberspace saying, well, okay, John, you're calling your podcast Blerd, Old Man Blerd. Aren't you part of this identity thing? Aren't you part of this, you know, exclusionary my tribe kind of thing? Uh, Actually, no. Had we started this podcast, Terrance and I, when we were first talking about it, this would be the oldest podcast probably about Black nerddom. It was initially going to be called Blurred Vision, but someone already had Blurred Vision, and so we couldn't take that name. But we were talking about this in, gosh, 2018, 2017, but I didn't know how to do it. And I had so many ideas of what I wanted to do. And, slowly but surely, I wrote That's So Quantum. I, have all of these other little podcast ideas that I'm going to be doing. One that my daughter's doing, which is Dangerously Beautiful. We're going to be doing Politrix, the Politics of Insight, which is a roundtable with left, right, and center people and no wing people. Um, so that's going to be happening. And so, I'm not, it's not about identity, even though this is Old Man Blerd. It is more about how our unique perspective as Black nerds sort of gives us a different perspective on some of these properties and some of the things that happened. Once upon a time, if you were a person that was Black and you liked comics and you liked fantasy, you played Dungeons and Dragons, you liked weird music, people would think that you were trying to be white. They really did. You couldn't even really like anime, which is funny considering how many Black people love anime. Hold on, dogs being crazy again. And so you really did get criticized quite a bit for liking things that were outside of your lane. You really did. And part of some of the things that are happening when it comes to representation, when it comes to people of color, some of these things are things that we as early people in nerd space just did not know that we could ever have. You didn't have a Black character that you could be in Pokemon. You didn't have, you could make yourself Black in D&D because who cares? So those things were around. And you typically were the one Black person at the punk show, the one Black person at the metal show, the one Black person who was, at the comic convention or whatever else. There was few, maybe not only one, but small amount for sure. And now that's not the case. And so the person says, "Oh, a Black person liking anime." There's a ton of Black people who like anime. It's almost a stereotype to like anime now as a Black person, but it wasn't the case in the 80s. It was hard to get anyway. It was hard to get those things. So some of the embracing of the change is being like fine with some of these things, uh, being more open, being more inclusive, or not being inclusive because you weren't used to it being inclusive anyway. And I think maybe something needs to be said when it comes to some of these older nerd folks because they were keeping some of this stuff alive so some of you younger people could enjoy it. Because if some of these crazy old men weren't playing Warhammer for decades, there wouldn't be a Warhammer to play, and there wouldn't be was it James Cavill playing or getting a production of a Warhammer show. Star Wars was the same thing. It's like the Star Wars universe largely kept alive because of the books, which, people have completely ignored when it comes to making stories, which they shouldn't, because some of those stories were really good. So what I would ask you to do, because I'm going to have to deal with this little creature. He is wanting attention and something is driving him crazy. Probably needs to go on a walk. Uh, what I would just ask you to do is to embrace the change. Embrace how you age with these properties, and that, maybe it doesn't have to change your way. It's okay if it doesn't change your way. I will still enjoy reading, no matter what X-Men changes into. I will still enjoy reading that Claremont Byrne run. I will always enjoy that, period. I don't need Wolverine to be a certain way. I don't need some of these characters to be a certain way. So, but I am going to let y'all folks go because it's getting loud around here. So I will hold on one. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Just a little bit more noisy than it usually is for the podcast. So I guess this podcast was just meant to be me solo this time. I'll have to find out what is going on for Terrance. I'm sure we will join you, or at the very least, I will be with Black Machine 312. You can find him on Instagram and in Reddit. Black creative when it comes to some Lego stuff, but I'm sure Terrance is fine. I know that this has happened a few times where he just can't quite get back home on time for work. So, anyways, just embrace the change. It's okay to age with these properties. It's okay that these properties do not obey your particular identity laws. And I will see you next week. Signing off, along with Milton here, who you, I'm sure, are hearing. And we love you. Keep supporting us. You can always drop us a line at thatsoquantum@gmail.com or drakestorm@gmail.com. Please take a look at That's So Quantum, that channel on YouTube. We're going to be having a lot of stuff pop up there very soon. And like we always sign off here, don't be a stranger, just be strange. Take care. Wow, a phone call.